Growing up, I was a really good girl. I always tried to do the right thing. I was good at school. I was good in class. Probably part of that is that, when I was growing up, I think there was quite an influential person in my life who I was never enough. I was never, ever enough.
What if the very thing that makes you brilliant at driving change is the same thing that gets you called difficult? I'm no stranger to this. Today I'm joined by Kat Hall. She's an organisational development expert and she's just finished a Masters in Change and Organisational Resilience. And she's built this brilliant adaptability playbook for leaders that is out there in the world and is starting to make a real difference. We get into this idea of rebels versus prefects, and also what Kat discovered about her own adaptability when she turned all that research back on herself. If you're a leader who is leading people through change right now, and I suspect you are, if you listen to this, I reckon this conversation will give you some inspiration as well as tools for implementation to make that job just a little bit easier. Hi, I'm Digby Scott, and this is Dig Deeper. It's a podcast where I have conversations with depth that will change the way you lead. Hey, Kat, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Digby. I'm pretty excited. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. I want to start with this. It's not really even a question. When I say the word rebel, you say?
Prefect.
Prefect. What are we talking about?
Good question. I feel like this has come up when I've been thinking about the session today and the conversation that we're going to have. And I was thinking back to many, many years ago, because we've worked together for a really long time on and off. And I was thinking way, way, way back to when we first started working together, you had this concept about, are you a rebel or are you a prefect? And I've actually used that quite a bit for my own thinking and helping other people to think about when they need to be the rebel and when they need to be the prefect. Yeah, I just kind of feel like that concept has really kind of popped up as I've been thinking about change in the session today. Come full circle.
Tell me your interpretation of those two words. Like, what does a rebel mean in the context of work, and what's a prefect?
In the context of work, I think a rebel is the person that pushes the boundaries. They kind of look at what else could be done, where is the opportunities to kind of push things and stretch things just a little bit further than most people would normally be comfortable going. Not necessarily like a massive rule breaker, but it's that person that just kind of bends the rules and stretches them. And, like that kid in the class who kind of always kind of got away with being really cheeky or kind of naughty, but not enough to get to the principal's office.
And was that you?
I was quite a good girl when I was at school. It's later in life that things felt a bit.
That makes me really curious about, okay, what happened? And a prefect is what?
Prefects, you're a person that likes the rules, likes to uphold the rules, likes safety in rules and to do the right thing. And, I think the rebel can also like to do the right thing, but they kind of like to push that a little bit.
And I'm hearing that was a spectrum from rebel to prefect, I'm imagining you kind of more down that rebel end. Knowing you, one of the things that I'd say you equate rebels with is asking really good questions, or at least provocative questions that might be annoying for people. Why do we do it this way? And it's like the kid in the class. Hey, so let's just acknowledge that rebels and prefects both have their places. Without the tension, you don't get change. And I think, I remember actually years ago on a big old leadership program, it's actually where you used to work at Inland Revenue. And we had this lady in one of the cohorts, and we're talking about change and evolution and transforming the business and everything. She kept saying, yeah, hang on, but there's a lot of good stuff that we already do. Let's not chuck the baby out with the bathwater. And she was kind of quite prefecty in that way. It's like, no, let's keep what the good things are and let's keep those rules. It's interesting you say rebels are annoying. I think prefects can be annoying for rebels because they're trying to not necessarily uphold the status quo, but acknowledge the status quo is actually, it's not all bad. And I think we need to learn to know when to go which end of the spectrum.
Facilitating a workshop this morning actually with a bunch of leaders, and we were talking about adaptability, like the topic, that we're kind of talking about today, and change. And we're talking about the fact that people who are risk averse or who like the rules or, kind of remind us that, we have things that we need to uphold, they're really important. If it's harnessed in the right way, it's really important. They help us to make sure that we deliver things in the right way, that we deliver things safely, and they're a good balance. I actually need people in those lives and need to actively seek people out who can bring that view, because I'm just like, oh no, we can do this. Let's crack on and get this done. Probably with not enough of a risk lens. So actually kind of finding those people who are the prefect who do bring that can be really important.
So there was Kat, the rule follower at school, and the Kat I know is not that person. What happened?
I rebelled. Growing up, I was a really good girl. I always tried to do the right thing. I was good at school. I was good in class. I always tried to be the good student, the good person, the good everything. Yeah, and I think probably part of that is that, when I was growing up, family dynamics as they are, I think there was quite an influential person in my life who I was never enough. I was never, ever enough. And so there was this thing that was ingrained in me around always needing to be the good person, to do the right thing, to not rock the boat. And then I kind of rebelled against that.
What age were you when that started to happen?
Maybe around 11, 12, 13.
The kind of like the teenager space rather than the typical 15-year-old, whatever. It was like, nah, well early.
Not in a kind of a really rebellious, kind of teenage way. I was actually still pretty kind of prefect-y the whole way through high school. I guess I kind of wanted to carve out a different path. I've started to rebel against some of the things that, I was experiencing. I was starting to rebel against, some of the things that, there was a couple of things. There was, I guess growing up, we kind of didn't really have a lot. And then there was always this sense that I wasn't quite enough. And I just felt a need to carve out a space in the world where I could carve a different path for myself, where I could actually prove my worth, that I could do better for myself and for my future than, despite all of that. The rebellion was more of a feeling and a sense of wanting to carve out a different life for myself. So it wasn't an obvious rebellion in terms of going out and partying and drinking and doing all that teenage stuff that came later on in life. But it was more around going, actually, I need to change my trajectory in life and I want a better life. I want to do better things and I just want to really succeed and show people that actually I can do well and I can do good things. When I talk about rebelling, it was kind of carving out a new life for myself and carving out success in my life despite some of the things that held me back when I was younger.
It's interesting when you say rebelling, it's not necessarily even that you were rebelling in your own mind. You were just deciding to go in a different direction. That might look like rebellion, to other people. You're saying, hang on, there's a way I want to go and I need to find out what that is. So I'm not going to do what is being laid out in front of me or the norms. You're just saying, well, hang on, no, I'm not going to push away from just for the sake of pushing away from. You're actually moving towards something. You just didn't quite know what that was, but you knew it needed to be different.
Yeah, I knew it needed to be different and I knew I needed to prove them wrong. And I think that was the rebellion bit in me. And so kind of thought at the time, oh, right, I'm going to show them. I'm going to become a lawyer. And I decided, that I wanted to be a lawyer and I was, pretty smart at school. I knew I could get into law school and do all that great stuff. And then I got offered this job when I left school to go and work in a legal office. And I thought, well, I'll have a kind of a break and a gap year and, see what it's like and I'll earn some money. And I went and worked for this lawyer and it was awful. It was so awful. The whole environment was stale. Even the smell of coffee in the office, I can still smell it in my mind. It was stale.
Do you drink coffee today?
Oh, I love coffee, but not
okay,
stale coffee.
You've got over that.
Yeah, so I kind of left school going, right, I'm going to show you. I'm going to become a lawyer. I'm going to do amazing things. And then I'm like, law is not for me. This is not my bag. So I didn't really know what to do. And then I kind of bumbled around a bit and I ended up in different administration roles. And I'm not a details person, that doesn't come naturally to me. And that just wasn't a great fit. And somehow I seemed to do okay enough to end up in some pretty good jobs. And, by that stage I was kind of earning money and just I was really lost. I didn't know what to do. So I ended up working in this big corporate company in Auckland. And I remember joining the HR team for the first time and I was the EA to the director of HR. And through that, I got exposed to organisational development. And they had this amazing OD director who worked there who I just kind of saw all this amazing work that she was doing. And I was like, what is this? This is amazing. This person's doing leadership development. She's building capability. She's helping people thrive. Like, she's talking about strengths. She's talking to me about strengths. No one's ever talked to me really about strengths. And I was like, I want some of that.
What was it about that stuff, say, compared to, I don't know, engineering or any of these other disciplines? What was it about organisation development, do you think, deep down lit a fire in you?
It was helping people to thrive. I don't know. It's kind of, I just saw the impact that the person and the work that they were doing were having on people, and the energy and the creativity. And, because I've always been a really creative person. I did a lot of, I've done a lot of art and things like that throughout my life. And it was the creativity and the energy and how people felt when they experienced the work that she delivered. And I was like, I want that. Like, I want to do that. I want to be that. That was it. And I think because at the time, it wasn't funny at the time, but I got called into this meeting with the HR director, and I ended up starting to do more and more work supporting like some of this, organisational development work. I got pulled into this meeting with the HR director, and she kind of said to me, Kat, she said, and then she drew these two circles, and one of them was a little circle, and it had EA to the HR director written in it. And then there was another circle that was a much bigger circle outside of that circle. And then she said, you're doing a lot of work in this big circle over here. At that point, I was helping them run wellbeing programs. I was getting involved in leadership development, and it was amazing. And she's like, you're doing all this work in this area over here. And she said, I actually need you to do your job. And this is your job here.
Oh, how did that feel?
I was mortified because, again, I was saying, oh my God, I'm not enough. Like, this is not good. And I remember being devastated at that feeling again of just not being enough and not doing the right thing and not being the good person. But it was a real turning point for me, because I think once I got exposed to that, I couldn't not do it. So then that became a mission.
There's a don't hem me in-ness to that. Like, the little circle, way too small for you.
Yeah.
And having to go back into that circle, I can imagine, the rebel would have potentially dialed right up, right? Or at least the next step was clear. It's not going to be EA.
Yeah.
So tell me, the Kat that shows up today, what's the stuff that remains from that 11, 12-year-old that was activated then that carries through to who you are today and the way you operate?
I still think I do a lot of things despite that. If I think about the work that we're doing, I've been doing a lot of work in the change and transformation space over the last, for ages, to be honest. I kind of, change and organisational development go pretty hand in hand, but I guess have kind of moved more into that change space. And I think my mission in life is to help people thrive at work. And I was trying to think about, how do I make that sound a bit cooler? Because that sounds really cliche, but at the heart of it, I just want to help people thrive. I want to create those good feelings and those experiences that I saw that director do 20-something years ago. And I guess kind of with change, I love working in change because I love helping people to thrive despite the chaos. It's gritty, it's ambiguous, it's fast-paced, it's relentless, sometimes working in change. And I love helping people thrive despite that. So that rebel comes out of me and goes, how do we just make you thrive? All the stuff's being thrown at you. How do we actually just make you thrive and really support you to do your best work in spite of everything that's going on at the moment? And how do we make sure that you're really set up for success, through this whole big process as well?
A time I remember quite a few years ago, you were in full rebel mode at Inland Revenue, actually.
Yeah.
And I remember you continuing to bump up against the status quo. You had so many big ideas, and I think you brought me in and others because you needed some thinking partners and some fellow rebels, right?
Needed some comrades.
Yeah. And I remember you weren't particularly thriving because you had all the ideas, but you were getting ground down because you felt frustrated from memory. You just weren't getting the traction you wanted to get. What have you had to learn a few years, going around the sun since then taught you about how you thrive in an environment where status quo is pretty strong, some calcification perhaps. I'm imagining you have to live this message. But when none of us are perfect, we're all struggling with the same stuff. What have you had to learn about thriving in the status quo?
I've always got big ideas. I'm a really big, creative, future-focused kind of thinker. And, sometimes I still get frustrated when I've got big ideas and you can see something that's really going to work. But I guess what I've learned is to kind of step back and really understand the context and, what is going on for people. And I guess trying to understand who am I working with and what is the incremental change. I think I used to always want to make big change in the world. And I just was on this mission to create big change and to develop and grow and take people on the journey with me. And I think probably what's changed a little bit for me is a bit more kind of gritty experience myself as a leader. So yeah, really understanding some of the grit and some of the challenges that leaders face day to day, which I probably didn't really have back then. So I was developing kind of leadership and change programs, not having had really gritty leadership experiences myself.
You've used that word a lot, grit. What does that mean? What's a gritty experience?
For me, it's the hard stuff. I think, leadership can be great when you're growing and developing people and building culture and doing all that other stuff. It's when you're bumping up against challenges, when you're working in a really difficult environment, when you're having to make hard calls and hard decisions, or it's that stuff that kind of when you're in the fire and you kind of are really kind of feeling the heat and you're needing to really kind of stretch and grow and to think differently as a leader to be able to get through the situation that you're in. And I think I've had more of those experiences since then. So I guess I've learnt a lot more about leadership. I've kind of earned my leadership stripes a little bit more. And I think, I've developed new tools and techniques for myself. I probably have a deeper understanding of how to take people on the journey with me rather than bulldozing ahead and hoping everyone comes along for the ride.
That's the cat of old, right? That the bulldozer. So what's the practical, you said you got a tools and ideas. If there was someone listening who's like, oh, Kat, can you help me? Can you give me some advice here around how do I bring people with me? What would you say?
It's kind of really, working with people and understanding what is the problem from their perspective and, how can we really get in and understand and really kind of dig underneath the purpose of the work that we're doing and what does it mean for different people and how do we bring a whole lot of different perspectives in the room. I think probably, back in the day, I used to try and seek out people who are more like-minded, and now I try and purposely seek out people with different views and perspectives who do wear the black hat, who are the potential naysayers as well as the big thinkers to really help me with, designing and delivering change and to try and understand from their perspective, what is the problem that we're trying to solve and how can we help you to deliver work better or more easily, or probably really kind of, taking that co-design approach and being more comfortable with incremental change and nudging people rather than trying to drag them across the change line with me.
Reminds me of my own experience because I think you and I are a little bit out of the same mold, right? We're big thinkers and we're impatient. We perhaps maybe more patient than we used to be. And I remember, in big change programs and transformation agendas and stuff, I remember, hearing a chief executive or a senior leader saying, oh, look, I heard a story the other day about so-and-so. They just had the different conversation. That's great. I'm like, wow. They're really okay with incremental, whereas I'm like, I want everyone to change tomorrow. And they're more like, oh, no, this is going to take a few years. I'm like, oh, okay, I've got a bit to learn here myself, and it sounds like that's what you've learned is that sort of slowing down. And the other thing I hear, Kat, is just the types of questions you're asking. It's not even how do we make this big change, it's what matters to you. How can I partner with you to help that become a reality? And what matters to us? And where do we have overlap? And those sort of questions, and digging into really where's the possibility and the opportunity.
And look, I'm still not a patient person. It takes all my effort to be patient. That doesn't come naturally to me. It's still a work in progress. It's still not a perfect process. But, I think that ability to kind of slow down to really understand the people that you're working with and your stakeholders, and really trying to kind of understand the world from their lens and to bring different perspectives and different thinking in is really helpful. So definitely kind of trying to ask the right questions.
Let me make a link to, you've just completed a master's. You did some research. What drew you to going to do some study? And tell us a little bit about the lessons, the learning you got from that. And I know it from what we've talked about earlier, it wasn't just the knowledge you gained about the topic, but it was also the learning about yourself through the process. So I'm being a little bit cryptic here because I want you to share, well, what was the research about and what did you learn about yourself through that?
So I've finished a master's in Change and Organisational Resilience last year through Academy EX, and just graduated, just in March this year, which was amazing. I just love learning. I love learning and I love growing, and I just felt like I needed to expand my own thinking, my own practice. I needed to be challenged a bit more. Just kind of felt like I was leaning on a lot of the same tools, the same ways of doing things, and I just needed some really fresh thinking and some growth and expansion to really kind of, hone my craft a little bit more, I guess. Yeah, and I'd looked at a number of different things. I'd signed up, and originally I'd signed up to do some sort of kind of postgrad kind of psych qualification through Waikato Uni, and kept rolling it over and didn't actually, the enrollment over and over and over. And I was like, I just don't want to do this. Like, it's interesting, but is it that interesting for me? And and I thought, actually, my heart's not in this, but I still want to do some learning. And so I kind of went with Academy X. I think I had started to do some work around the future of work and was really interested in kind of AI and disruptive tech and around, and starting to kind of really get a sense of the change and change, if that makes sense.
No. Can you
No,
explain
the change
that?
and change.
Yeah, what does that
It's a
mean?
bit cryptic, isn't it? Yeah, I was trying to describe this to someone today, and I was talking about, I guess, the world of change is changing a lot. I think, we used to look at change as being quite this really linear process where you'd kind of go, right, we've got this technology change or a ways of working change. And, it'd be, kind of a project, and it would be, delivering change, and there'd be kind of a start date and an end date and a transition date and milestones. And, you'd do all your stakeholder mapping and, think about how you bring people along on the journey and support them to, adopt and embed and sustain change. And it kind of, we used to look at change as like this process that had almost like a start date and an end date. And it's not like that anymore. So, the world of work is changing like rapidly, and, we've got like, kind of the layers and complexity of change, the pace of change, and a lot of the changes that we're experiencing, some of them still have a start and end date, but some of them don't. Some of them are kind of multi-layered. We've got, I think even in my own organisation that I'm working in at the moment, like significant government change, political change, AI, automation, society changes, economic changes. And I'm kind of looking at this and thinking about the future of work kind of program that I was leading and going, gosh, we need to do something differently in the change space. Change management needs a bit of a shake-up. And as a change practitioner, how do I stay relevant in this rapidly changing world of work? What are the skills that I need to think about how I deliver change across the organisation in this context? And also, how do I help other people to really thrive through that? And again, this kind of need to really kind of go, how do I help people thrive again in, adversity? And I think we hear a lot about change fatigue, and, I think it's quite a general thing across organisations. And I think we need to change the narrative. I think we need to be talking about how do we flip the narrative, because actually the world that we're working in is changing all the time. So this whole concept around adaptability, I started to think about how do we flip the narrative? How do we flip, from going from change fatigue to adaptable and flexible and able to keep up with the pace of change and able to stay relevant as things change around us so quickly? Yeah, and I think at the time I was also looking at, some of the work that I was doing, and I was kind of struggling. I guess probably part of it was me again wanting to deliver fast, hard change and, and bumping up against, a little bit of resistance here and there and need to slow down, but also, a need for kind of just going, why is it that some people adapt to change more easily than others? And what is it that actually drives that? And what is the behaviour that sits under that? And how do I unpick that? So that kind of became my topic for my master's. I guess I was just really curious about how do people adapt to change? How do we enable that? How do we build that as a capability in organisations and in people so that people can keep up with, the pace and nature and complexity of change?
And I think in your journey of that research, you discovered a bit about yourself around your adaptability. Tell us about that.
Yeah, when I started the research, I guess I wanted to understand, what is adaptability? It's it's a buzzword. It's all over LinkedIn. It's in lots of different leadership papers at the moment. And, it's a big buzzword, but I was like, what actually is it and what enables it? And so I started off doing some research around the traits of adaptable people and what are the actual kind of traits of people who adapt more easily to change than others. I learned about, 6 traits, if you like. So 3 of them are, more kind of personality and disposition type traits, which is around self-efficacy and people's belief that they can change, they can do hard things, they can, adopt new ways of working, that confidence and self-belief that they can change. And the second one was around resilience and that composure during change, that optimism and seeing the opportunity that potentially comes from change. And the third one was around openness to experience. And the research was kind of showing that if you have, the self-efficacy, the resilience and the openness to change, it enables you to actually deliver, adaptive performance on the job. And this is where we start to see problems starting to be solved more creatively. We start to see people learning new ways of working, that learning agility comes into it. We start to see people kind of collaborating across teams and boundaries and cultures and things like that to actually deliver meaningful change. But I was looking at these traits of the personal traits of change, and I've always loved change. I'm like, yeah, I love change, absolute change agent. And I looked at them and went, how do I stack up against this really? And it was confronting. It was, I was looking at it going, yeah, openness to experience. I'm always open to new things and trying new things and doing things differently. That is not the issue for me. The issue is in my self-efficacy and my belief in myself sometimes. And then there's another issue around my resilience. And so looking at my own optimism and resilience, not when I'm developing and delivering change, because that's awesome, but, as part of my job, but when I'm experiencing change myself that I'm not leading.
When you're not initiating it.
Yeah, when I'm not initiating that, how does that impact me? And so I actually kind of, it really was this kind of eye-opening experience where I was kind of looking at the research and then really deeply reflecting about myself and actually how do I show up as a leader? How do I show up as a change leader or as a people leader? And how do I demonstrate these traits as part of my own adaptive leadership? So I think it was a really good opportunity to kind of take a good look in the mirror and think about the things that I needed to kind of grow in and work on.
And how are you working on those, the self-efficacy and the resilience? What's helping you? Because I think this idea, so let's just have a bit of space to think about this. For me, I'm a bit the same. When I'm in the driver's seat and turning the key on and putting the accelerator down around change, I'm pretty good. I can adjust the pace. How fast are we driving? And, do I dial it up now? Do I dial it down? Do I need a break? Whatever. And so the resilience piece to me is pretty good. The thing I have to work on in both of these situations when it's done to me or happening to me as well as I'm enabling or initiating is the idea of the efficacy. And I found myself last year saying to myself, I can do hard things. And that was my mantra, and it actually still is right now. I can do hard things. And what's helped me is to look at the evidence over my life of when I've had to do hard things before, and there's plenty of evidence that I can. There's plenty of evidence where I've run away from hard things too, but there's enough evidence for me to go, I can do it if I choose to. And that's really powerful for me. So it doesn't mean I'm not scared. It doesn't mean that it's not hard. It means that I can actually lean into that and I'll come out the other side okay. And that's really helpful for my sense of self-belief, that keep moving forward rather than give up. How does that sit with you, that idea?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I was actually thinking that whole time I was doing the research part of the master's was probably a test of my resilience. And yeah, I think during that time we had some big things go on kind of personally, and probably like one of the hardest years I've had in my adult life, trying to do a master's with some really big stuff happening kind of in our family life. And there were so many times where I wanted to give up. And I was thinking it would have been really easy to give up. It would have been really easy to pause my master's or, to kind of put it on hold. And I probably had some really good excuses about, why I should do that. But again, I guess there's this kind of slightly determined person that came out that was like, far out, just some more adversity. Let's just push through it. Let's just keep on going. But also, I felt like as a parent, I needed to role model perseverance and I needed to role model resilience. And, I've got a 13-year-old son who was watching me do my master's and watching how I was responding to the things that were going on around us in our world. And I had to find resilience and I had to find some belief in myself that I could keep on doing this and I could, persevere through the hard stuff and continue managing these things that were going on in my life, plus trying to do a master's and finish a master's. And I couldn't not do it because I felt like I've got this 13-year-old who is highly impressionable, who's watching his mum and watching what I'm going to do. And so I felt like that was something that I just had to step up and I had to work through, that I had to find the self-belief and the resilience and the positivity and the ability just to keep going and finish it. And I was, probably quite worried about what kind of role model does that set for him if I just gave up.
What do you think he would say now about you, what he noticed about you through that process?
I think he'd see that I kept on going, that things were pretty tough and I kept on going.
And so maybe that's the lesson he's taking from the role modelling, hey? That you got to keep on going.
Yeah, just take one step in front of the other. And yeah, I always kind of had this kind of thought in my head around, that, I'm finding Nemo, that fish Dory, and she just keeps swimming, just keep swimming.
Yes.
And it almost became my mantra, just keep swimming, keep chipping away, keep chipping away, keep going, don't give up. And yeah, I guess that kind of became my mantra. I use it as a bit of an example, quite a few times, during my master's around that kind of analogy of Dory, and I just got to keep swimming.
I get the impression there were a couple of motivating forces, actually. One you've named, which is the be a role model for your son. So almost don't let him down. Coming back to proving to someone, like proving that you can do this, right? And the other one feels to me like it's your why for the work, that you want to help people thrive at work. So there was this sort of a don't motivator, like don't stop because my kid's going to see me stop. So show him that I can keep going. And then there was this pulling forward force, like this research matters because it contributes to my big why for my career.
There was a point where I could start to see in the research that this is actually important. Like the stuff that I'm delivering is important and the stuff that I'm researching it's interesting, it's important, it's valuable. I had amazing people contributing to the research who just brought so many awesome perspectives. And I felt this responsibility to kind of be able to package that up and share that back. Because, all these people with this, incredible, this credible thinking that contributed, I just felt like there was a responsibility to actually be able to package it up and to actually use that to support change, whether that's through my own practice, whether that's through sharing some of the research with others so that they can use it in their own kind of leadership and change practice. And so, yeah, off the back of the research, I actually developed a playbook for leaders and organisational development, HR kind of professionals to use.
Which is awesome.
Thank you. And that kind of translates, I guess, all the theory. There's a lot of theory during a master's, but it actually kind of translates it into practical tools and models and things that can be applied to actually build adaptability in a workplace. And so, Yeah, but I guess I just felt like I was the steward of this information and so much amazing kind of knowledge that I needed to finish it to be able to help others.
Either you using this stuff or seeing others use what you created in the playbook. How's that coming to life in your workplace, other places? What are you hearing or what are you doing?
I ran a workshop on it this morning. That was fun. We talked about a couple of the models and just introduced, kind of adaptability and what it is and how you build it, the different traits. And one of the things that I always see people kind of relax a little bit because we talk about adaptability and, so what we're talking about this morning was around think about people who you think are really highly adaptable and types of traits that they have, and think about the people who you think struggle to adapt. And then I talk to them about the traits of adaptability and what's come through the research. And then I'm like, the good news is that we can all learn to adapt. It's not a you have it or you don't. And people go, oh, that's great. Because everyone's got someone that they're thinking about, that they're leading in their team or they're working with, or maybe themselves, where they kind of, really worried about that person's ability to adapt to change. The thing that I found really exciting was that actually it's something that we can build through different work practices, through the way that we lead, through our culture, through the way that we deliver work in the organisation. So I always see people kind of relax into that a little bit, and it's nice to then be able to kind of give them just some tools and techniques to help them to do that as part of their work.
What it's getting me thinking is as I've got older, I reckon more easily able to adapt, I think, when I hold things lightly. And most things you can hold lightly is what I'm learning. Well, not many things you have to hold really tightly. I wonder whether that just comes with age or wisdom or something. But that to me, I'm sitting going, what actually matters? There's only a few things that actually matter. The rest of it, well, I can be good with whatever happens, with that stuff. And I'm finding that's helpful for me.
Not holding anything too heavily or being too attached to something, yeah.
Specifically the concrete thing of, I need this type of plant in this room for, I don't know, whatever. Like, well, what about you just have greenery? Maybe that's the principle.
Or enjoy looking outside the window.
Yeah. What other ways can you get greenery? It's kind of that sort of thing, right? Let's imagine, leaders listening to this and they're asking the question, how do I help my people, my team be more adaptable? What's one piece of advice you'd say start here?
Adaptability, I guess starts with psychological safety, and it's, I didn't set up to research that at all. It's kind of what came through the research when, as I was kind of working through the masters. But it starts with psychological safety and innovation and permission to innovate and create and to try new things. And they all go hand in hand because people won't innovate or create if they don't feel safe to do that. Adaptability and innovation and creativity go hand in hand. And so if you're a leader thinking about how do you build adaptability in your workplace, think about, what are the changes that you're experiencing at the moment and where are the opportunities, in between what's rigid and change, to think about where are those little gaps where people can play and experiment with change and really kind of own what the change looks like and means for them. And then think about, what are the opportunities to give them some autonomy, maybe there's some boundaries in there as well, but some autonomy to kind of just go and try it out. Go try out that new tool or that technology, or go and try out that new way of working, or, do some thinking around what this new piece of legislation means and, and what could we do with this, even though we haven't had say in it, what could we do with this? Give people permission to just go and try and experiment and play with the change. I think that starts with creating an environment where people feel safe to try, where they feel safe to give it a go. And being able to kind of go and reflect with them and say, okay, so what's worked well, what hasn't worked well, what did you learn, how do we adapt the next time? And it's that ability to create and innovate without fear of repercussion or failure. And so being able to be really clear about what they can innovate with and where the boundaries are and what permission they have and what that looks like is really important as well.
Yeah, I've been reading quite a lot about self-determination theory and this need for being able to have agency, to be able to go, look, actually there's something I can do here. It's not just being done to me. And I think that feels like such a fundamental idea underneath what you're saying, hey? So let people play.
When people have that agency, that ability to kind of figure out what change looks like and how it works for them, that's when you start to get the resilience and the optimism and the self-efficacy where people go, oh, look, I tried this and it worked, or it didn't work, but I actually know what to do next time. It's where you start to get more openness to experience through the exploration. And so give them space to play. And if you're struggling because you feel like change is being done to you, just try and find the gaps where they can play. Just something small, doesn't need to be huge, but just give them a bit of agency.
As we come into land here in our conversation, we've been covering some territory, Kat. What's something that's popped up for you that you've learned or been reminded of as we've been talking today?
As we've been talking today, I guess that whole concept around the rebel and the prefect keeps popping up for me, and I love it. Yeah, I love it. I guess it's a good reminder to keep going. I feel like when you're working in the change space, there needs to be a little bit of a rebel with you because you need to be pushing things along and actually kind of helping to enable and enact the change. But also don't forget the prefects and make sure that, they're brought on the journey as well. But yeah, there's that piece around keep trying new things, keep trying to push the boundaries, keep trying to find that way through the grit and keep helping other people to thrive. And I think, I guess what this has done is helped me to really reconnect with my purpose as well and why I do what I do, which has been really great reflection. So thank you for that.
Oh, pleasure. It's so good to hear. Thank you, Kat. You've mentioned the playbook. You've talked about your research on adaptability. How can people find you or your work?
Catherine Hall on LinkedIn. We use my full name, which normally my mum only uses or my husband uses when I'm in trouble. So I think I'm Catherine Hall on LinkedIn. So it's the best way to find me.
Kat, thanks so much. Rich, real, inspiring. Love talking to you as ever. I'll see you soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
I reckon the one big thing I took from my conversation with Kat was this idea grounded in self-determination theory, the idea that we need agency. We need to feel like we're playing a part in whatever change is going on for us. It's not just happening to us. And I've always found that I feel better when I'm in motion around change, that it might be a responding motion, as in something's happened and I've got to deal with it, but I'm actually choosing to do it this way, my response. Or it might be getting out of thinking mode and just into take the next step. And I find that something as simple as that, just like being deliberate about the next step, is so useful. If you're in the thick of change, which most of us are, the idea of just trying something new, just trying a next step, call it an experiment. Just try something to see what you learn, see what happens, I reckon is really, really important. This idea of just intentionally doing something and then going, what did I learn from that? If you're leading people through change, as Kat was saying, create the conditions for people to feel okay, just to try something. And not just the trying, but also then sharing the learning and making it a culture of curiosity, a culture where we're all about not just achieving, but learning as well. A few reflections. What about for you? What came up for you? And what might you try or do? I reckon go and grab that adaptability playbook off Kat's LinkedIn profile. That's a good start. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Thank you, as ever, Cane Power, for making this sound awesome. And for Gemma Jacob, my practice manager, for herding the cats. Pun intended. I'm Digby Scott. This is Dig Deeper. And until next time, go well.